The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, wants to increase council tax for those in the most expensive houses if the SNP wins the Holyrood election in May. The Conservatives said it was right to keep the council tax, but Labour said the SNP was breaking a promise to scrap it. Here's our political correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
Nicola Sturgeon's cooked up changes to council tax that should bring in an extra £100 million a year for schools.
Those living in the highest value houses in Scotland will pay more.
How much more? Well, nothing in property bands A to D. £105 a year extra in band E, rising to £207 in band F, £335 in band G, and £517 in the top band, band H, with exemptions for those on low incomes, including pensioners.
We are introducing reforms to the council tax that will ask those who live in the most expensive houses across our country to pay a bit more. The vast majority of people will not pay any more as a result of these changes, and some families with children on the lowest incomes will pay less.
There was a time when the SNP wanted to abolish council tax rather than to reform it. But after 9 years in power, they've decided to keep it after all and to try and make it a bit fairer.
I think we accept the principle that people in large properties should pay a little bit more, but we have to be careful that we are not making more expensive properties more unaffordable.
Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP have won not one but 2 elections on a very clear promise to abolish the council tax, and the SNP have broken that promise today. In fact, the only thing they've abolished is the council tax freeze.
If the SNP avoids rejection at the election, the freeze will be lifted in 2017. That would let councils raise more for local services by putting up tax across all bands. But any increases would be capped at 3% by the Scottish Government.
The SNP seem more determined to take control away from local communities and authorities. They think they know best in this place over my shoulder. I think local communities know better. These plans are insulting and they're timid.
We believe that local government should be much more autonomous. We believe in strengthening local democracy, and that means giving them the powers to raise the money they want to spend on local services.
In future, councils may also be allowed to tax derelict land and development, and they'll get a share of Scottish income tax revenues. But a reformed council tax that makes those in bigger houses pay a bit more is the centrepiece of the SNP's plan. Glenn Campbell, reporting Scotland.
Well, the SNP plan to reform council tax isn't as radical as some had hoped for. Back in 2007, the party planned to replace the tax entirely with a local income tax. And last year, a major report examined several alternatives. As our local government correspondent Jamie McIver reports, those who'd wanted big changes are disappointed.
The council tax helps pay for all sorts of local services, like this gym. But whether it should be reformed or replaced has exercised minds for years. What the SNP proposes is well short of the radical change some campaigned for. This is about reforming the system, not replacing it. The body that represents most councils isn't happy.
I'm really surprised that there's so little been announced. From the point of view of just adjusting the bands, it looks very much to me tinkering around the edges. Something that if that was to deliver a quality, and it could have been done some considerable number of years ago.
Last year, a commission set up by the government and COSLA studied local taxation carefully. It came up with detailed options for change. Its recommendations were never binding. Still, some are surprised the SNP isn't being bolder.
We've had a commission on local tax reform which did a really good job. It collected vast amounts of information and evidence, consulted with people throughout Scotland, and concluded that although they didn't come up with a specific that the council tax should end, that the council tax standstill should end anyway, that was an unfair scheme of taxation. And what we have is a council tax with a few bells and whistles on it.
The SNP says the money raised will go on education, maybe helping the children here when they're older. Most people won't pay significantly more council tax under the SNP's plans. The bigger impact will be on those who live in more expensive properties.
Any extra pressure on a family budget is going to be difficult, but at the same time I do appreciate that the councils have been quite cash strapped in the last few years.
I don't have a problem paying tax, but I think anything needs to be justified.
When it comes to any big change, they say no pain, no gain. Just ask at any gym. So is mere reform of the council tax simply an easy option, or is it the better one? Voters get their say in May's election. Jamie McIver, reporting Scotland.